We're going to start off, we decided that the fundamental question we wanted to ask to begin with today was, what does a healthy community look like? And we've been fortunate enough to attract to talk with us about that some people that really have got some experience, not just of thinking about or writing about that question, but also of doing something about it. So I want to introduce our first panelist. It's going to be a very interactive day. You may have noticed that all of the sessions are expressed in terms of a question. The reason for that is we don't know the answers. And we're hoping that some of the answers will come out of today's conversations. Who knows what we will create together? That's the spirit in which we've organised today.
Can we just thank Brendan and Birdside for putting on a face-to-face conference?
Thank you, Matt, and thanks for helping to make such a warm atmosphere when people walked in, both upstairs with the have you been up to the public? Did I mention the public living room? Yeah. I just love it, and particularly the fairy lights, and for creating the warmth that we've got in this room. So, the first panelist we have, I'm not even going to try to sum up the work that over so many years has been done in all over the country, but based down in the southwest. By Hazel Stuteley. You want to know more about Hazel Stuteley? She's with the C2 Connecting Communities. She has such rich experience of working with communities to support their development, but also one of the reasons it's called C2 is that she sees two communities in any one place, the people who live there and the people who work there. So, Hazel, welcome and thank you very much for joining us today.
Bless you, Brendan. Thank you so much.
And then we have there are many local government workers and officials around the country doing wonderful things to try and create better conditions for communities to support themselves and develop responsive local authorities that can assist them in doing that, rather than telling them what to do or rather than doing it for them, but instead doing with and alongside. And none more so than East Ayrshire, and we're so delighted to have Katie Kelly here with us today to talk about her experience up there.
I hope you would have picked the pipe in more than 2 years.
The what?
The pipe that you talked about, the council.
You'd have done it the next day, innit?
A year.
Oh,
Yeah.
Of course, the experience that's brought me here today of getting to know, working with, and learning about Beotthog means that I really want to have Beotthog represented, because, well, I've said already what I feel about that. Our next panelist will talk about it a bit more in the context of this conversation. So we're delighted to have the Chief Executive of Beotthog International with us, Thijs de Blok.
Thank you, Brendan.
And finally, online, we hope, is my good friend, who I've also never met in person. Oh, yes, I have. Yes, I did meet him in person. But I feel as if we've met online so many times in the meantime. Are you there, Cormac? Hey!
Hey!
Many of you will know Cormac Russell. He heads nurture development, working out of the Dublin area in Ireland, but all over Europe, and the go-to person for asset-based community development. Cormac unfortunately can't be with us today, but Cormac, thank you so much for joining us online. And you can hear us clearly.
Yep.
All right.
We can hear you. Loud and clear.
And we can see. So I've just been reminded I don't have to look there. I can look there because that's what we got that there for. So, of course, I forgot the basics, the housekeeping. The toilets. This floor, third floor. You've probably worked it out already. Fire. Cue fire escapes. Cue fire escapes? Aha! It's behind you. I need Matt doing that riff again. All right. So, is that all the announcements, Rachel? It is, isn't it? That's it. So if the alarm goes off, this is what you've got to do. You've got to get out and you've got to use the stairs and you've got to go to your nearest fire exit and you've got to gather underneath the beautiful Waterloo Bridge. That's the gathering point, right? Okay, have you all looked at the view from the third floor? Isn't it gorgeous?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to, first of all, Cormac, can we have Cormac back? Oh, Cormac's there. Is that enough fire announcements? Can we have Cormac back?
He's on the side screen.
Oh, is he?
We have side screens.
Okay, so you can see Cormac.
Yes.
All right, good. Cormac, can I start with you? Cormac,
Sure.
what is it that makes a community healthy?
I think of a community in terms of what it does. So I think we have to live into community, thinking about it as a verb, not a noun. So I think that the act of sharing our gifts with each other and receiving gifts from each other, that's at the heart of what makes us well and healthy. There are other things, there's a lot of things we can do together with our neighbours and through associational life, through walking lightly on the planet, through good, nutritious food. So there's a lot of things we can do locally, but then there's also some things that need to be done that supplement a healthy neighbourhood. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but I think that's where local institutions and maybe institutions that are outside the neighbourhood can really create domes of protection and support around places. So I suppose for me, what makes a healthy community is it hatches from inside out, and then the outside supplements and creates a dome of protection, because there are forces that will do our communities down. And we need local governments that actually protect our communities in order that they can actually build and be healthy together. So it's like you were saying, Brendan, really at the beginning in your wonderful opening remarks, but for me, it's neighbour to neighbour at the heart of it. That's the nest out of which health is hatched.
Thank you, Cormac. That's a lovely beginning. Oh, I heard a ripple of applause. Hazel, may I ask you the same question? What makes for a healthy community?
Super, thanks Brendan. And thank you Cormac, you gave me this lovely chance to say something in a minute that I'd really like to talk about. But first of all, for me, a community, a healthy community, and I'm a nurse by background and a midwife and a health visitor. A healthy community is a community that's got a sense of self, that has a sense of, it knows its own worth, has a sense of influence and control, and it runs things for itself, and it creates health for itself. And for me, a healthy community is a connected community where neighbours are connected, but not just. Brendan, you mentioned that the 2 in C2 stands for 2 communities. We see a parallel of community alongside the people who live in a community, that community of people who work in a community, the frontline professionals. And guess what, guys? Our experience over many, many years is that that parallel community are just as disconnected, just as needy, in need of understanding, in need of being connected. They're often on short-term contracts. They're often in organisations that don't value them. So all we've done in C2 over the many, many years is create space to bring those 2 communities together, the people who live in an area and the people who work there. We know that health is all about, 80% of health is about the broader determinants, about local crime, education, housing, local government. We know all of that. Doesn't it make sense just to bring those people who all work in that community alongside the people who work together? But guess what? And they work together as equals, and that's for me. And they know each other's first names, and they know each other as people. I know you're going to not believe this, but you'll say, how can this possibly be? I qualified as a nurse in 1971, so I did my training in the 60s, so I'm incredibly old. But I was first affected by health inequalities as a student nurse. You know, the midwife in London cycling around. I could not get my head around the injustice of it. And so I've been seeking ways ever since. And gosh, this is like a dream come true. Today's conference, I hope I haven't said too much, must just pay tribute to Brendan and to Björtzorg. Joss, I might meet you later. I was one of those annoying groupie ladies that attack you after you've said, I heard you at a conference and I thought you were wonderful, and it had so many similarities to the way we work in C2, and I thought this is the future of neighbourhood nursing in the UK. And so I was then gravitated towards Brendan, and here we all are, and a huge reunion with many, many old friends. So I couldn't be happier.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Hazel, before I move on to Katie, you said at the beginning of that, what I really want to talk about is, and then you, what do you really want to talk about?
Gosh. Language. Do you know what? It is really, really important. Sometimes it's easy to get overwhelmed. I mean, goodness, health inequalities during COVID, didn't it break all of our hearts, all of those lives? Health inequalities just should not be happening, should it? Do you know, sometimes it's overwhelming. Something we can all do, and I was thinking about this. Can you believe I live in the far west of Cornwall? You can fly the Atlantic in the time it took me to get up to London. But so I had a lot of time to think, let's ban the word deprived. Let's ban it. Communities hate it. Let's stop talking about bottom up and top down. We do it all the time. We reinforce that negative construct, don't we? Let's never talk about hard to reach ever again. Language is, just so important. There are many other words I could bring in, but I thought that would be something I'd just love to share with you today. Let's start using a different language. And Cormac, you gave me that. Thank you for that. Let's talk about community-centred, because that's what works. It's from the inside out and the outside in. Absolutely. So thank you for giving me that in. But no more deprived, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, Hazel. And Katie, I introduced you, I hope well enough, about the work you've done in East Ayrshire, which has been all about enabling a local authority to be highly responsive to the local community and really build on the assets there. Could you talk a bit more about your experience?
Yep, absolutely. In terms of a healthy community, I love what Cormac says. For me, a community is a verb. It's a doing. It's something that does together. It isn't a noun. It isn't something that's reified. And it isn't something that is labelled with so many things that actually it's got no hope of change in that reputation. So from my perspective, what I've seen in the 30 odd years I've been plugging away at this, and we were talking about disruptors. We have great fun. We're pioneers. We see the moon and the stars before anybody else, because it's bloody cold at times, because it's hard, you're out there before other people are doing things. For me, communities, they have an identity of their own, and often organisations or institutions, as Cormac will call them. He'll call me a bureaucrat at some point today, so I'll say it before he does it. We have a bit of fun with this. But actually, public sector and public service has almost, neatly put communities into brackets, and ward 2, X place. A community is a place that people love and identify with. People don't say, I'm from East Ayrshire. They say, I'm from Kilmarnock, I'm from Bonneton, I'm from Shortleys, I'm from the mining town of New Cumnock. I have heart there. I have love of place. So to me, a community, the first thing about a healthy community is that it knows its own identity and it's proud of its identity. I think we've almost taken identity away from communities in some way because we've tried to govern them and manage them, but we all do it. We see it in every part of our lives. It's neat and tidy to put communities into boxes with certain population sizes that will work fine for distributing a budget or school placement. So from my point of view, we started by really getting alongside people, and not the council's agenda in terms of saying, okay, we do this, this and this for you. It's actually, what are your hopes and dreams? Not there's £30,000, what might you spend it on because we're going to empower communities, but actually, what are your hopes and dreams? Most people's hopes and dreams are worth way more than 30 grand. And in fact, they might not even be worth £1, but their hopes and dreams might be to know their next door neighbour better. So until you actually sit and listening and deep listening to hear what communities want and love, what their hopes and dreams are, and then surely my job as a public servant, they own me. It's their space, it's their ground, it's their budget, it's not mine. Then it's finding a way together to make those things happen. And Cormac taught me this. I've been greatly influenced by both of these people and their thinking over the last, the 13 or 14 years in East Ayrshire, where things have really changed, because we weren't great for a while. But actually it was the questions that the communities say to us as well: what can we do for ourselves? What do we want to do ourselves? We don't want you involved in it. Get out the road, because we can do that fine for ourselves. We're not children. What do we need your help to do? Some of the things that we have hopes and dreams about. How can you step into that space with us as equals? And what should you be doing for us? Probably fixing the pipe. Although, if there's a good plumber in the community, there's no reason why he couldn't do that himself. So from my point of view, a healthy community is somewhere that has an identity of place, has hopes and dreams, and has power over their decisions about their own lives, influence to make change. We talked about this a lot, and Harry Burns really influenced that, who used to be the Chief Medical Officer in Scotland, that if people have power over their own lives and their own destiny, they live happier, healthier and longer, better than any drug could help you to live. So I suppose for me, this is messy, it's pioneering work at times, but it's scale, and the way to scale this up is not a programme or a toolbox. We hate toolboxes, we're talking about a whole range of different things. Actually, the way to do this is to connect communities that have started to feel that ambition with another that maybe feels it differently. And sometimes in East Ayrshire, now just before I shut up, one of the most exciting things for me was there was a community in East Ayrshire called Netherthird, and they'd got on really well. It was really an ex-mining community, a small place out the outskirts of Cormac, and they just made amazing things happen. They took over a bit of ground, planted stuff. It's always about gardening, isn't it? It's so important, growing. But then it became more and more. And then there was a posh community in Fenwick, a lovely community with a fancy church. In the front of their action plan had a church. It looked like a chocolate box. Yeah. And Fenwick were struggling. So we bussed Netherthird into Fenwick, and they told them how it was done. And they made friends. And they were, we talk about socioeconomic classes and deprivation. That went out the window. Netherthird had more skills and talents because they'd made them live, and they were able to share with Fenwick how to make that happen. And then if those connections are made across communities, then institutions can't get in the way. The movement of change happens. So that's probably where I'll stop.
Thank you very much, Katie. Of course, we do have plumbers.
Yeah, there you go.
And we did think of fixing it ourselves, and you'll guess what the problem was.
The insurance guys.
Yeah,
said they wouldn't.
And it was too risky, because if anything had gone wrong, then the council said you can't do that because it's too risky. But of course, these are all problems that can be actually easily solved, where the mindsets. We
went with our risk manager, so we had the same thing. The communities wanted to take lawnmowers and tractors and things, and our guys in risk management said, "Oh, we can't do that." And I said, "Well, when you go home at night, do you live in this community and you cut the grass? So is there a risk assessment?" So we actually met with our risk guys externally, explained what we were trying to do, and they got on board as long as we put the training in place and did it. So we now give out chainsaws. Watch out if you're in.
Okay, we got a lot to learn from you for our in the London Borough of Islington, that's for sure. So thank you very much, Katie. So I introduced Thijs earlier. Thijs has been working with Buurtzorg now for the last 5 or 6 years in many different countries. And can I ask you, Thijs, when it comes to the relationship between what professionals do and must do, and the very name of Buurtzorg being the Dutch for neighbourhood care, how do you see those relationships between what the professionals do in their wonderful self-managed teams at local level and what communities and people that the professionals are supporting can do for themselves?
No, what I like to start with is when you said in your introduction that when the parks in your council and they deformalized what needs to be done, and I think that's part of the success of Buurtzorg. So as a service delivery, the nurses are highly educated and highly motivated, but they also have the opportunity to be the glue in the society. So if they have extra time to get to know their clients, not just being the service provider, but talk to their children, talk to their neighbors, you can actually avoid a lot of care cost. And the neighbors feel more empowered around setting up these networks for their sick neighbor or for their sick mother or father. And I think that's part of the success of Buurtzorg is being part of that healthy community as well as a service provider and a client. And I was thinking what example I would share with you today. And well, we weren't able to do it this year and last year because of COVID, but we've organized a race for people with walkers in the Olympic Stadium a couple of times. So it's the walker race, and people from all over the country, from different communities, come together. And there was an incentive of one of our nurses that said, one of the clients said, there's a race for everyone, there's a competition for everyone, but not for us. And we demand a competition. So we said, well, let's get it done. And people start practicing in their own neighborhoods with their own neighbors, and they come together, and they coming together towards a purpose. So I think it's having someone that has the right tools to be the glue, giving people purpose, and then empowers to better results within a neighborhood.
Thank you very much, Thijs. I think that's a great example because when I was opening up earlier, I talked about how what's needed is to do what's needed and not what isn't needed, and do what's needed when it's needed. And of course, the only way you can determine that is in the relationship between the relationships between people, because all of these different needs will be unique. And what I love about that story about the walker races is that started with a conversation between one nurse in one locality and the person that she was supporting. And then they did something about it together. And then that spread through the way that Buurtzorg shares knowledge and information, not by Jos or Thijs or anybody else, or Honey or anybody else from Buurtzorg here saying, this is a good initiative, this is best practice, why don't we all do it? But no, put it out there. Oh, this is what we did in our village, this is what we did in our team. And then other teams get in touch. Oh, that sounds good, how did you go about it? And before you know it, it's at the Olympic Stadium. Yeah. And that growth of knowledge out of enabling people to work with freedom and responsibility around a common and shared purpose is so creative in terms of solutions.
And given it to the British context, what we started from was talking what benefits does it have to have this walker race, not what can go wrong during this walker race. So, and I think that stops a lot of creative and good ideas to come from the place, oh, but what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And to start with the positive and to deal with an issue when it arises, not when a potential issue on the road, that creates more creativity and better ideas and the execution of good ideas. Because there's no shortage of good ideas. There's plenty of good ideas, but doing it is the next step.
Okay, thank you very much. Rachel, remind me, do we have a roving mic? Aha, so now it's a moment to ask you if you've got any questions for any of our panelists, including Cormac. Let's not forget he's there. Or indeed any contribution anybody here would like to make. Put your spoon up if you've got one, or put your hand up if you haven't yet got a spoon.
Does work. Good morning. My name is Nadine Wyatt. I work for Sutton NHS as Senior Engagement Manager. So all I do is to talk to people and try and build healthy communities. I think what was coming to my mind listening to all of you, which is really refreshing, is people will have different ideas of what a healthy community looks like. And I think one of the challenges, I grew up in Jordan and then moved to Greece, and they don't have many care homes, for example. It's just, you just don't have that. You know, in Jordan, the kids look after the parents, whether they have dementia, whether they have anything. So they look down sometimes on, you know, why is it in England the mom is left by herself? There is something about different cultures have different norms. And I think England is one of those countries where you have lots of different nationalities and cultural boundaries. And sometimes people in a particular community, English may not be their first language. There is that, and I'm not trying to sound negative there, but there is that kind of, how do you go through some of these, because surely they're not going to be enablers. And it's always very difficult. So I think that's why sometimes when I talk to people, I find it's the same groups of people that connect with each other. I guess what we're trying to do here is to create a healthy community and neighborhood, regardless of where you come from or what area. But these things are facts, and we have to find ways to deal and work around them without people disrespecting kind of each other.
Thank you very much. That's a really important point. Rachel, can you see the other hands? By the way, the spoons, if you haven't got a spoon, let me explain the spoon idea. When Camarados, because of COVID, couldn't set up public living rooms, they decided, well, we'll do it online. And they called them spoon rooms. And I joined it a few times. And the idea was bring along a spoon, make it, dress it up. I've gone for the minimalist approach. But other people prefer a lot of glitter and lights. And it just lightens the atmosphere a little bit. So I recommend spoon rooms, which I think, Matt, are still going on. Even though you can have your public living rooms again, there are still spoon rooms once a week, twice a week.
Well, communities run them themselves, but my team do a couple of weeks. Yeah.
So maths, because it's proliferating, and that's the whole idea of it, isn't it? Thank you. Next point, please.
Hi, my name is Rose Rickford. I'm a PhD student looking at grassroots community organising during the pandemic. And my question was about, so some of the things that you were saying about sort of communities taking responsibility for and having the freedom to care for one another within the community. One of the things that struck me about that was, first of all, obviously that it has the potential to meet people's needs in a much more organic way, but also that it tends to be women that take up the burden of unpaid care. And how do we find ways to allow communities to do their own organic care without that inadvertently basically meaning women taking up an increased burden of unpaid care?
Great question. Thank you very much indeed, Rose. Any others? There's one at the front here, Rachel. Thank you.
Hi, thanks. My name is Rob from Cornwall. My own specific interest is in mental health, and I speak as a previous practitioner, but also as somebody who has used services myself. And I say that with a great degree of caution, because in my experience, usually when I say that, in other people's eyes, I suddenly start to fill a different pigeonhole. Oh, he's a lived expert, and I've spent 10 years in the field now, trying to encourage people to work much more. Much more in this style, which for me is flatter structure, much less hierarchy, much less emphasis on professional titles and roles, much more emphasis on what the collective culture and community already knows. There is a great deal of expertise in this room already. I've been working with this method. I was lucky enough, my first ever boss, when I left school in 1982, used this method, essentially. This is the way I prefer to work. And I've been trying to push for this method of working since about 1985, something like that. And in this country, all I've encountered actually is resistance and the words, Rob, we don't work that way. So I guess this is a plea both to those organising the conference and on a more personal level, that there is already a huge amount of expertise in this room, in the collective consciousness of this room. And for me, this is my natural way of working. To a large extent, I feel like I've come home. I really do. This is where it's at. And I passionately believe that if we learnt to work this way as a norm, we would have healthier communities who were keeping themselves healthier, the whole process would be more enjoyable and it would cost less. I think we're unnecessarily overcomplicating it.
Thank you, Rob. Fantastic. Before we take another contribution from the floor, Cormac, you've been sitting there patiently and listening. We've had 3 really good contributions there. One about the specific cultures in different countries and different localities, for that matter. Katie was talking about the different cultures in Cumnock, an ex-mining town from say Edinburgh. And then Rose was talking about how if we create environments where communities look after themselves, we know that in our culture this is going to be leading to likely to lead to more burdens on women in particular. What do we do about that? And then Rob's point about needing to work this way, and the collective wisdom that's here in this room, and indeed way beyond this room. Cormac, can I ask for your observations about what you've heard?
Sure. I've really enjoyed actually listening to everybody's comments, and I totally agree with that idea that the wisdom's in the room, it's in the collective. So it's humbling to have this space and privileged to be able to share some thoughts. Immediately what struck me was, I think what we're all trying to do in our lives, whether we're paid or we're trying to do it in a civil sense, is we're trying to enlarge freedom and shared space and have joy and have a good life within that. And that sometimes what ends up happening inadvertently is that managed space is what comes out the other end. So I often think about, our work as increasing shared space and reducing managed space. Now, how we do that in a way that says there is nobody's contributions that don't matter. Everybody is needed. Everybody's gift, skill, knowledge, and experience and cultural richness is absolutely essential to this cause. We cannot do it alone. I mean, the other definition of a community is that everybody's gift is given and received, right? That means organizing. That doesn't just happen. That means we have to think about things like, how do we ensure that we create a circle of connectors that represent the diversity of the community, that begin to invite stories that are stories that move us towards a preferred future and away from very limiting beliefs. Stories that maybe say the only way things can get better around here is if somebody from outside comes in to make them better. Or the only people who can care around here are those people over there or that gender over there. On Saturday morning in my local neighbourhood, I watched 2 burly guys training little waddlers, small little kids, how to play football by holding their hands and running around with them, singing Sharky, Sharky, Sharky in the Sea. It's one of the most tender things I've ever seen. In all kinds of ways, I feel that how we are understanding care is moving past a very limited narrative around responsibility and burden. And we're beginning to talk about the ability to respond to other people, not just other humans, but also other species on the planet, our ecology and our cultures. Care is the absolute cultural expression of a community that has come home to its true potential. And that's not something that can be put on the shoulders of any one culture or any one gender. But I think Rose's point is well made, because actually there is a disproportionate amount of caring responsibility, both emotional and practical care responsibilities, that is falling on the shoulders of women. And it's really striking too, in the old style way of how community used to organize itself, where we went to meetings instead of had parties. I think one of the things you would see is that while many of the women did the emotional and practical care, many of the men chaired the meeting. And I think we absolutely need to lean into that and talk about that and understand that. I just come from a call where I was working with folks on the island of Bumlow, where we're actually starting this conversation in kindergarten, so we can begin to reimagine what we mean by care and what we mean by citizenship and what we mean by community. and so that everybody can show up. I think it's so important. So for me, beginning to find a circle of connectors and moving past the narrative of leadership. I'm not at all convinced that this is about leadership. I think this is about connectorship, and it's about maturing a definition of care that gets beyond old-style gender roles and old-style kind of hierarchical narratives of let's have a meeting and let's have a chairperson. Everybody has to contribute to this movement.
Thank you.
We're not perfect.
Thank you, Cormac, very much. Hazel, can I ask you to respond to what you've heard so far as well?
Absolutely, and thank you for the lovely comments. They're super questions. I think the thing that occurs to me is, I think that thing that brings us all together is, and what we know works, is creating the conditions for communities to self-organise, for people to self-organise. Our experience over many years now is when a community gains the confidence, and it's very much around confidence, to self-organise, that's when the magic happens, because self-organised communities become self-caring communities, and they will sweep up your ladies who are struggling to care. That's our experience, isn't it, guys? I'm so happy that, Brendan, you've allowed me to bring guests from communities that are doing it, and some are just starting it on their journey today, so it's wonderful. So I would say how important, though, is just listening to a community. When you listen to a community, that community will tell you exactly what needs, and it won't be what's in your stats. Just going back to that thing I was saying about language, and I'm indebted to Gillian and RJ and Carol, who have just started working with a wonderful GP and team in Surrey. And incidentally, guys, isn't it exciting? ICS's primary care networks, they're all embracing health creation, aren't they? What a joy. Going back to that, Gillian sent me an article the other day in which, and it was the latest article from the CMO, a guy I've got huge admiration for, Chris Whitty. But you know, going back to that language thing, it's about coastal towns. It's about the poor health in coastal towns. I bet many of you are from coastal towns. Kay certainly is. Hands up who's from a coastal town. I'm going to go back to math. Sorry, I'm going to use the SH word. It's a bit shit in coastal towns, isn't it? Life's a bit difficult, bit rubbish, isn't it? Has been for donkey's years. Now, that report, though, as wonderful as that report is, mentioned the word problem, challenge, over 160 times. Guess how many times listening was mentioned as a solution? Once. Mm-hmm. So we need, all of us, to remember how to learn how to listen. It is not consultation. It is not strategies. It's just pure old-fashioned listening. And boy, when we collectively listen, I'm going back to those two communities, the communities of people, the wonderful Katie, we've practically self-combusted. If I lit a fire, my gosh, you stoked it with fire lighters, Katie, and you chucked stuff on it because it's gone woof, hasn't it? Gosh, I don't know where I was going here. Something about listening. When we can collectively listen, and the community needs to hear its own voice as well as the community that work there. You bring those two listening voices together, boom, magic happens. It's about identifying what are the barriers to people not leading the best lives they are. And you'd be surprised what they are. We do listening events, aren't we? Aren't we constantly amazed by what our listening events come up with? In one place, everybody thought it was going to be antisocial behaviour, and because it was shocking, they said, please can we have fences round our garden? Our estate's open plan. We have guys going to the fly tip, getting sofas, moving on our lawns, drinking. They put fences round. Guess what? All the behaviour's changed. So I don't know if I've answered the question, but it does come back to language. It does come back to listening. It does come back to self-organised communities, creating the conditions for communities to self-organise. And they will do it big time. And it'll cost, guess what it'll cost? The biggest one we're known for is an amazing transformation that happened in the 90s. We got the Treasury to evaluate what that community had done for itself. Guess what guess what we started off with money-wise? It's not about money, never has been, never will. Chucking money at something doesn't work, can't work. We started off with 0. Guess how much these guys, this community in West Cornwall, top of the deprivation, I've used that word, I put a pound in the swear box, sorry, for all the wrong reasons, generated £4.3 million worth of social health and social care resources for itself. And guess what, 25 years on, still going great, it's still led by the community. There's a story there I might tell you later. I don't know if that answers your question, but I love stories, don't you?
Thanks, Hazel. Katie, what do you? How would you respond to what you've heard, including what Hazel and Cormac have just said?
Oh, I mean, everything they've said about the kind of listening, and also this gentleman said about complexity. I think we hide behind complexity. It's too difficult to do this, and I absolutely believe in de-stratifying. We're set up in bureaucratic ways, and I said this earlier on, we have administrations. Even the way we describe there's an administration, there's a ward. These aren't words that open themselves up to community. So those things really resonate with me. When the lady talked about different nationalities and cultures, I'm greatly interested in that. And the first thing that flew into my head was in East Ayrshire, we've been so fortunate to have 50 refugee families from Syria come to live. And it's been brilliant. And I remember at the start, when this happened a few years back, people said, oh, what will it be like? And there's some horrible things in the press. But we decided that we wanted to welcome families, particularly with young children, to come. And we've done a lot of work in many of our communities. And rather than get involved in, we get loads of inquiries, we still do from the press wanting to visit the family. And it's none of your business. Actually, we got the community where we'd found a house for a family. We didn't put them all together. We found a community, and the community got together before they came. We told their names, and they got the house ready and all the rest of it, and people brought things. And the culture of the Syrians that are brought to East Ayrshire, it's been fantastic. So it's what Cormac says, sometimes though, when you bring communities together, the conditions have to be right for all voices to be heard, all skills and talents to be shared, and all cultures to be respected. And I think the Syrian families that have come and stayed in East Ayrshire, and some of them have gone to university, one of them's become a plumber, and he's very good, and he fixes things before 2 years. But actually, in his previous time,
Pin him down.
I know, absolutely. But I think for me that there's a richness there that has changed the shape of those communities. But those communities were ready to receive that and with care and love. And so that's one thing that those families came into my mind. I thought if things are done right and the condition, the space is right, as Cormac describes, then other cultures bring an amazing richness to what happens in that community if it's respected. The stuff about care, and I don't know, I'm going to be controversial, maybe I shouldn't, but you'll throw me out quick and I'll go back. I just see the word care, it's like the word nice, it's losing its bloody value. It's a 4-letter word, I said it earlier on. Care is about caring and loving, and when I care for somebody, I feel good that I did the caring, and the person that I cared for feels good because I cared. And it's been monopolised, and it's become something that seems to me that you can buy and sell. And yes, and then we could get into a debate about then whether care should be paid for. Well, again, my experience of the carers that work in East Ayrshire, they live in the communities that they work in. We try to pay them a good, fair job, and they love the place. So if the carers are paid because family members can't step in, there isn't that natural network, then there's part about that adding quality, wealth, keeping wealth local, because Mrs. McLumfer, lives in Patna, and she cares for 6 different people there in Patna, and she's paid to do the job, and she's paid well and looked after, but she knows the ladies and the gentlemen that she goes. So there's something about, I think the word care's lost its, and we're all getting into this big debate about care, and it frightens me. It's the same as the word kind. I mean, Bridget Russell, who's here today, we have the science of kindness. Oh my God, just be kind. So we try to complicate things, and things become, care is not a commodity. I know some people think it has become that way, but I'm afraid for that. And I think natural care, natural supports, whatever you want to call it, if you're using jargon, the person who cares gets even more out about it than the person they care for. Through the pandemic, people stepped up to the plate and called to action in the communities that I serve. They were buzzing because they were helping each other. It made them feel good. The big secret here is when you care for somebody, you're kind and good to them, or you help out your community, it makes you feel brilliant, it makes you feel healthy. But actually people think it's a favour you're doing. So I suppose, I know I'm going off piece, but complexity, watch out for it, because people are hiding behind it, and it's usually guising fear or protectionism. And care, please don't let it be a commodity. And the richness of cultures could add so much to our countries to make us even better, to learn. I'd love to have a place where we didn't have to have care homes. I really would. I'd love to be in.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. Before I ask Thijs to come back in, and we're going to have to close in 5 minutes with loads of questions unasked, let alone unanswered. Forgive me, but we've got the whole day ahead. We called this event 10 conversations and hundreds of natters. The hundreds of natters are between you and happen upstairs, and I hope that you'll have plenty of those natters and continue whatever conversations you've heard today. But before I ask Thijs to come back in, I just want to go to a question we've had from online, which is from Gail, and she said, such amazing work happening using these community-centred approaches, ABCD, C2, East Ayrshire, Butzog, etc. These are such different ways of working from conventional approaches. Do the speakers see progress in getting these very different ways of working truly embedded in the mainstream in the UK or anywhere in the world? And I thought that would be a good question to pose just before you come back in, Thijs.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. But I think the question comes from a point that the Buurtzorg way or the ABCD way of working would be counterintuitive. But I think it's the most intuitive way to approach things. I've never heard anyone say like, oh, what you do with Buurtzorg is really how we never looked at it. It's so unlogical, because it's the logical way of structuring things. The things that make it unlogical, and it's coming back to your comment, Rob, is we don't do things this way because rule A, B, and that creates complexity. And by starting from the grassroots and working from the bottom up, what is logical to, sorry for using the word, care for someone? How do we structure the care around someone's needs, not only their medical needs but also their personal or mental needs, and how do we do that in a way that works best for the service provider and for the client, is, I think, the most logical way to do things. And by putting managers or executives or planners into places, and then, okay, let's make a planning based on the most efficient route for a nurse to have and to do her work, not looking at the people that he or she will be attending to. In my eyes, is not logical. So I think it can work anywhere. It just needs enough volume of people that say, we want to work this way, and let's get it done.
Thank you very much, Thijs. We're almost out of time. Any other really pressing questions? Also, I've got another one online which we could go to, but we might return to that other question online later in the day. One more at the back there. Just could you wait for the mic, please? Otherwise, they won't be able to hear you online.
That was really amazing, and I am really interested in the idea of working in communities in a community model. And I was listening to your introduction, and you talked about the idea that people came around a garden because the council had actually stopped working there. And so obviously the bit where you came together is really positive. But it came from a fact that actually the state relinquished responsibility for that area. And it's clearly important that the state doesn't do anything, doesn't do everything even. I'm a bit worried that, especially with our current administration and the way that pandemic has been managed by the government, that they'll use this growth in community organising as a way to relinquish responsibility, when actually I really believe that the government and the state, or whatever you want to call it, needs to have bottom line for its citizens. And that's not about, as everyone says, being there and doing everything. I just think there is an issue with going, right, communities can manage themselves, we'll do it. And so then it leaves people to be put their hands up, it's not my responsibility. And then in that situation, it can often lead to vulnerable groups who are already in some ways excluded from the communities, in a way being more excluded. So I suppose from your all expertise, I know one person there is from the council, how do you how do you work with communities while making sure some sort of social contract even, is maintained with the state, and we don't just go, oh, actually, no, it's not my responsibility, you can do it all, and let inequalities continue to persist.
Lauren, that's a fantastic point.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad you said that, because actually there is a conversation developing nationally in Britain about community power and about returning power to the community, and it's actually not one agenda. There are different agendas there, and one of them is the agenda precisely of doing what you've just suggested, of the state, of the withdrawing from responsibilities entirely and leaving people to do it for themselves. That's not the only agenda that's being expressed in the community power movement, but I think we do need a much more critical engagement with this conversation about community, and I hope that we've started it today. Now, we're running out of time. Lauren, I'm going to let you have the last word rather than responses to your questions, not least because it was such an apposite and important last word, and we do need to stop there. I know it's traditional to go back to the panel and ask them to have the final say, but as you might have noticed, we do things a bit differently. So we're not going to do that. We're going to stop on time. I'm going to finish by saying many, many thanks to you all for being here. It's fantastic. Honestly, the view from here is so inspiring. So it's so fantastic to see you all. Thank you to Hazel, coming up on the sleeper from Cornwall overnight. Thank you to Katie for coming down from East Ayrshire. Thijs drove here with several of our colleagues from Buurtzorg on the ferry from France. Cormac, so many thanks for joining us. Too bad you couldn't be with us in person, but I look forward to seeing you in the flesh again very soon. Many, many thanks to you. And finally, thanks a million to Math for getting us started this morning and for contributing with your camarados colleagues to making it such a warm environment.
And not quite final, Brendan, thank you for facilitating.
Yay!
Thank you very much. Thank you.